Now, one other difference between these two kits is that the OF-1400 kit comes with 3 collets. You're going to have the half-inch collet like I have here. You're also going to get a 1/4-inch collet and then an 8mm collet. So those all come with it. It's nice that you don't have to use any collet adapters that you have to double squeeze, and those are always a nuisance anyway. The 2200 comes with the half-inch collet. That's it. If you want to get any others, you're going to have to go and get those as accessories. So that's something to take into account. Now, there is a difference in design in the collet for the 2200. So the difference is in the collet. Now this is the 2200 collet. You can see that there's the nut covers the whole front of the collet. You can't really see the collet at all, just the cylinder inside. This is the collet for the 1400. You can actually see the collet in there. You can see there's the cutaways in the metal so that it can squeeze down. So now you can see them side by side. These are both for the half-inch. So this one here can actually get dust inside there that you're gonna have to clean out. This one here is a little bit more maintenance free in the sense that it's much more difficult for the dust to get inside once you've put a bit inside. So it's a nice improvement that they've made that's probably gonna trickle down to the 1400 someday. So as a final comment, this router here, I mean the 1400, it's certainly not it's not a little kiddie router that's not going to be able to do the vast majority of your work. I've never found it to be underpowered in anything that I was doing. Half the reason for me going for the 2200 was when I originally was going to buy a router, the 2200 was announced but not yet available for purchase. And I really liked a lot of the ideas, especially this column for catching the dust that it comes down to. You know, knowing how dusty a router can be. This router runs pretty, I won't say it's dust free, certainly chips can get away, but the fines are all captured by your dust extractor. So I find that it's excellent for that. The ergonomics are a little different, I mean considerably different between these two. There's double handles here that are angled. This one here is more of an overhand grip when you're reaching to the other side. Both of them are comfortable, but only in their own way, because they are different. I would say that when I've used this router, it's a 1400 watt router. Many other brands will have 2¼ horsepower routers, but we know how some of those are measured. What I'd like to do is go over how the plunge mechanism works on the OF-2200, and then I'll also contrast that where necessary with the 1400. Now, people may not have used a Festool router before, so I'll go over some of the basics of how you do a plunge with the Festool router. Now, there's a turret stop down here, like we're used to on all different routers. There's a couple differences with this one in particular. There's this plunge rod here, so if we loosen up the rod, now this rod can be raised and lowered. So what you would do is, ideally you would set it loose, you would plunge the router down and say, oh, that's about where I want it. This is already dropped down onto one of the columns here, and you'd lock it into place. Now it's repeatable. You can plunge till you bump, and that's set your height. Now, one thing that is common to do would be, when you have this loose, is that you would drop this router down until it hits the top surface with the bit, and then what you're going to do is now you're going to lock the height. Okay, so that could be our 0 point. So what you can do is you can use this other little indicator here, and you can slide it down to 0 on the scale. There's a little scale there. This one's in millimeters. Now, just as a side note, this is a 1/4 inch wide tape. If you were to go to Eagle America, they sell a 1/4 inch wide imperial tape that you could stick over top of this if for some reason you're metric challenged. So now that you've got this zeroed, if you wanted to, now you can loosen this rod up, and then you could raise the whole thing up to, say, the 20mm mark, and now you can lock it. Now, you had already set this to stop at 0 when it hits the top surface, and now you've given it an extra 20mm of depth. So of course now when you do your plunge and the rod bottoms out, you've now plunged to 20mm. So it's a very simple mechanism, but it is a little bit different than other brands. Now, with this in the locked position, you can see there's this whole head here where the screw locks into the rod. That is controlled by this micro adjuster up here. With each turn, with each click, you're going 1/10 of a millimeter. So one full turn is going to move it 1 millimeter. That moves this portion here that locks up against the rod. So you can, after you've set this depth, you could adjust it by 1/10 of a millimeter at a time, and away you go. Now, what I've shown you there so far is the same as what happens on the 1400. The 1400, the micro adjusts down here. One difference between the two micro adjusts is that this one here, the numbers on it, you can actually, if you just hold the rod, you can spin this so you could set it to a 0 point here on the mark. Whereas with this, it's all integral. You'd have to remember the number. Personally, I never use the number. I just care more about what it cuts. Okay, so now we know how the plunge mechanism generally works. Now, with the turret, you can set the different turrets like we're used to. But there's a very key one on here that's different than what's on the 1400. What it is it's a turret that comes in two heights. There's an outer edge here that's 2 millimeters higher than the inside portion that you would normally use. So what you would tend to do with this is, you'll loosen this up, you set it to drop on the lowest portion. You're going to plunge the router down and say, okay, that's the right height. Push this down until it, it hits that bottom spot, lock it into place. Let's go ahead and set 0. Well, it actually was 0. And now we're ready to go. We can do the plunge and we can plow it all out. But you don't want to hog that whole profile out in one pass. You can, but it comes out cleaner if you're not doing that. So what you can do is then you can just move it that little half click over, and now that 2 millimeter step is in the way. So now when you plunge it down, you're going full depth minus 2 millimeters. But you haven't had to change your plunge setting here at all. So you're going to take advantage of the fact that it's off by 2 millimeters, and then afterwards you'll do a second pass, do that half click over, and now you're going to full depth. So now you can do your cleanup pass, taking off that last 2 millimeters for a nice quick pass. So that's really useful, especially if you're going to be doing it on multiple pieces of stock. That you don't have to worry about fiddling with this, adjusting it by 2 millimeters, and it's not quite right. Then you're doing a mitered corner, and then nothing lines up properly, so you got to get out the Bondo, and nobody likes that. Okay, now one other difference. This is the difference between the 1400. The 1400 does not have that. The only way that you could accomplish it would be maybe to bury this screw all the way down and bring this one all the way up, or vice versa with this and put a 2 millimeter difference between the two, which certainly you can do. Or you can do what is sort of time-honored, and that would be, you plunge it down, set your full depth, and then after that, every time you do your first pass, you put a ruler in there and lock it in place. But this is nice that it's all built into the turret mechanism for the 2200. Now, one other difference. You got a little green thing here. Anything green on a Festool is adjustable. So what is this one used for? What this one does is it'll actually lock the router down in the plunged position. Now, of course, you're thinking, but that's what this little plunge lock is on the side. This is used while you're doing an adjustment. So what you can do is you put it again where it's going to do a full depth plunge. So the turret, the special turret, the lowest one, you push it all the way down. And then what you can do is you turn this lock and you put the lock in place. Now it's going to stay down. While you're in this position, you've already locked this plunge, you can turn the micro adjuster, and the micro adjuster still adjusts. Now you don't want to route with it that way. This is only used for doing the micro adjusting, okay? And when I do a demo later, I will be taking advantage of that to try matching the profile made by the 1400. So I've shown you most of the features that are available with the 2200, along with some of the accessories that come in the external accessory kit. And I've certainly gone over the 1400 both here and also in my separate review of the 1400 that you could refer to. But what I wanted to do is, a lot of people have a question of which router do you get? That's always, especially when neither one of these is inexpensive. So you want to make sure you get the right one that's going to serve your needs. Now, why I have two, I should probably explain that. I got the 1400 originally. At that time, the 2200 was announced and all the features were out and a lot of pre-marketing was done, but it was not yet available, and I needed a router. So I, looked at the forecasted price for the 2200, and it made the decision for the 1400 a little easier. I mean, this router is a lot more expensive than the 1400 router, so you got to take that into consideration, especially when you think that there are a number of accessories that you can get for the 1400 between its kit and the edge guide, and then the guide stops. You have about everything that you care about. You can do a lot of stuff with that. Whereas with the 2200, you basically get the 2200 and the integral plug. So you're going to need to go out and get an accessory kit. You can buy the accessories piecemeal, but it's going to cost you a lot more than buying the accessory kit. So you might as well just go ahead and do that. Well, to put it in perspective, the accessory kit is very close to the price of this router. So that's always going to be a factor for people. Why did I get the 2200? Recently they had a router promotion, so it was, there was a pretty good sale on it. And the reason why I got it is because I know that the CMS unit is eventually going to make it through UL and get to the United States. And at that time, I would really like to have this 3 horsepower plus router in that table, besides having just a plain nice router. At that time, I might even consider selling the 1400. That doesn't mean that that's the right answer for you. So what I wanted to do is I want to do a demo where I'm going to run both of these routers. Now, I don't have anything like an amp meter that I can put on it to show you the instantaneous draw, and the 2200 greatly exceeds the little kilowatt meter that you can get. So I didn't want to be able to do that. What we're going to do is just simply run it. You'll be able to hear it. You know what a router is supposed to sound like, and you can determine whether or not it sounds like it's getting bogged down or not. What I have here is a piece of 6/4 hard maple. It's an offcut from a project because of a really big knot right there. What I'm going to do is I'm going to run this profile. It's called the linen fold profile. It's kind of nice. I actually use it quite often for the edges of shelves and drawers. It's not going to be hogging off a ton of material, but it will take off a fair amount. We're going to run that on the side of this 6/4 stock using both routers. And actually, I'm going to do the 1400 first so that I can show you how that plunge lock and adjust mechanism works on the 2200, so we can line it up to be identical to where the 1400 ran it. And then I'll actually run a little bit on it so you can see how close we got it. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to plow a groove. So I have here a 1/2-inch spiral bit. I'm going to run a 1-inch deep groove on one side and then on the other side. Even though it's scrap, I don't really want to waste it all. So doing those two operations, we should be able to get a good idea how well the routers will go. Personally, I don't think that the linen fold is going to be a problem for either one of these routers. The groove that's going to be 1 inch deep in hard maple, that's a 1/2 inch wide, in one pass, might slow down the 1400, but it might also surprise me, so we'll take a look and see how it goes.